I used to think that the worst thing that could happen to a person was losing someone they loved. I've revised that opinion, because there is something worse than loss. There is the moment you realize that something on the other side of a door knows your name, knows your voice, and has been practicing exactly what to say to make you open it. I was 31 years old, living in a house I'd saved 4 years to afford, in a quiet neighborhood where people waved at each other from driveways and left packages on porches without a second thought. I was the kind of person who felt guilty for not answering the door. That guilt almost got me killed. What I'm about to tell you happened 14 months ago. The case is still open, and whoever knocked on my door that night has never been found. The house was a modest 2-bedroom on a tree-lined street in a suburb that had exactly 1 traffic light and a diner that closed at 8. I'd moved in alone after a breakup, fresh start, new chapter, all of that. My closest neighbor was an elderly man named Gerald who kept to himself and waved from his porch every morning like clockwork. Across the street lived a young family, 2 kids, a minivan, a basketball hoop in the driveway. Normal, quiet, safe. I worked from home most days as a medical transcriptionist, which meant I spent a lot of time alone inside that house. I knew its sounds the way you only know a place when you've been inside it for hundreds of quiet hours. The way the furnace kicked on with a low grunt every morning. The particular creak of the 3rd step on the stairs. The way the wind came through a gap in the kitchen window frame when it blew from the east. I knew this house. That mattered later. It was a Wednesday night in late October, not Halloween, 2 days before. I remember because I had a bowl of candy on the counter already, the cheap stuff I'd bought early to stop myself from eating the good stuff. It was around 9:40 p.m. I was on the couch with a cup of tea, watching something forgettable on television, when I heard the knock. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, evenly spaced, not urgent, not the rapid knock of someone in distress, measured, patient. I muted the television. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked at my phone. No text from a friend saying they were stopping by, no delivery notification. I sat still for a moment, listening. Nothing further. I told myself it was probably a neighbor, maybe the family across the street needing to borrow something. I got up and walked to the front door. I did not open it. Something, and I cannot explain this rationally, made me look through the peephole first instead of just turning the handle the way I normally would. Through the fisheye lens of that peephole, I could see my porch, the steps, and the edge of the front path. There was no one there. The porch light was on. The porch was empty. I stood at the door for a long moment, eye pressed to the peephole. Still nothing. I concluded it was kids messing around. The holiday was close, after all, and I started to turn back toward the couch. That's when the knocking came again. Same rhythm, 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. I spun back to the peephole. The porch was still empty. My heart was suddenly very loud in my chest. There was nobody there, and yet the knock had come from the door itself, from the wood directly in front of me. The sound had been inches from my face. I stepped back from the door. My mind was doing the thing minds do. It was searching for the logical explanation. Old wood settling, a branch against the frame, a neighbor kid hiding below the peephole's field of view. I forced myself back to the peephole, and this time I looked longer and lower, trying to catch any movement at the edge of the porch. That's when I heard the voice. It was a woman's voice, soft, slightly muffled by the door, but clear enough. She said, "I'm so sorry to bother you. I think I hit your car." I pulled back from the peephole.
I live on a quiet street. People do park in front of my house occasionally. My car was in the driveway, which was to the left of the porch, out of the peephole's view. The scenario was entirely plausible. A woman, a fender bending, an awkward nighttime knock to let me know. My hand actually moved toward the deadbolt. I stopped. Something was wrong with the voice. I couldn't name it immediately. It wasn't that it sounded fake exactly. It sounded careful, like someone who had rehearsed the sentence, like the words were being placed rather than spoken. I called out through the door. I asked her to describe the car. Silence. 5 full seconds of it. Then, "It's a gray one. I'm really sorry. I just need you to come look." My car is blue. It has been blue since I bought it. There is not a gray car anywhere in my driveway or on my property. I did not respond. I moved away from the door entirely, back toward the hallway, and I dialed 911 with hands that had started shaking in a way I couldn't control. I whispered to the dispatcher what was happening. She told me to stay on the line, stay away from the door, and that a unit was 6 minutes out. During those 6 minutes, 3 things happened. The knocking came twice more, same rhythm, same patience. Between the second and third knock, I heard something that turned my blood cold. A voice, the same woman's voice, but coming from a different direction, from the side of the house, near the kitchen window. She said, almost conversationally, "You should really just open the door." She had moved. She had walked around the side of the house while I was on the phone, in the dark, without making a sound I could detect, and she was now standing outside my kitchen window. I could not see her from where I stood in the hallway. I did not move toward the window. I crouched in the hallway between the kitchen and the living room, the lowest and most central point in the house, and I stayed there with the dispatcher's voice in my ear. The third thing that happened came about 90 seconds before the police arrived. I heard the back door handle move. Not a knock, a slow, testing rotation of the handle. Someone checking whether it was locked. It was. I had locked it out of habit when I'd come in from taking out recycling earlier that evening. That lock, that one automatic habit, may be the reason I'm alive. The police arrived. They circled the property. They found no one. What they found instead was this. On the back door, there were fresh scratches around the keyhole, consistent with someone having attempted to pick the lock. On the side of the house, near the kitchen window, there were footprints in the soft soil of the garden bed. 2 sets, 2 different shoe sizes. She had not been alone. On my front porch, tucked behind the corner post, where it would have been invisible through the peephole, they found a small black drawstring bag. Inside it were 2 zip ties and a folded piece of paper. On the paper was a hand-drawn layout of my house, the rough shape of it, with windows marked and a small X on the back door.
Someone had mapped my house. Someone had been watching it long enough to sketch the window positions and identify the back door as the preferred entry point. The woman's voice, the story about the car, the knocking, it was all distraction. It was a method to get me to open the front door, or at least to confirm I was home and alone before they moved to the back. The police took the bag, the paper, the photos of the footprints. They canvassed the neighborhood. Gerald, my elderly neighbor, told them he had seen a car parked on the street for 2 nights running. A dark car, no plates visible in the dark, that he hadn't recognized. He hadn't thought to mention it because, and I remember this detail precisely, he said, people park on the street all the time. I stayed with my sister for 3 weeks. I had a security system installed before I moved back in, cameras on every corner of the property, a reinforced back door frame, motion lights along both sides of the house. I sleep with my phone on the nightstand and the bedroom door locked. The case remains open. The woman's voice, the 2 sets of footprints. There were at least 2 people involved. No arrests have been made. No one matching any description has been identified. The detective assigned to my case called me 4 months ago with no updates and has not called since. I think about one thing more than anything else: the map. Someone had to have drawn that map. Someone had to have walked around my house, in daylight presumably, and counted windows and noted the doors. They did it carefully enough to get it right. They did it in a neighborhood where I knew my neighbors, where I felt seen and familiar and safe. They did it while I was inside, probably, while I was making coffee or transcribing files or watching television with no idea I was being studied. I never heard a thing. There are nights when I lie in bed and I hear a sound, the furnace, the stairs, the kitchen window in an east wind, and my body goes rigid before my brain can catch up. Not because I think they're back, but because I know, now, with a certainty I can never unknow, that the sounds of a safe house and the sounds of a compromised one are exactly the same. Until they're not.